I have the privilege of being the Member of Parliament for Bermondsey and Old Southwark. There's a map off camera, but a community of more than 100,000 people, right, but with some very distinct communities within it. So the sort of Elephant and Castle, London Bridge, Bermondsey and Rotherhithe. How did I get into politics? My mum was ill when I grew up. My mum has schizophrenia, so she had sudden onset when I was very young. And it made me, growing up with mum in that condition and the damage it did within our family, parents splitting up and mum being very ill for a long time, made me a bit more aware of social policy issues. And it was the sort of policy side that drew me into what could work better and how best can that be achieved. And the Labour Party was where I landed in trying to work out how better people like mum and families like mine could have been supported, which would have had better outcomes for everyone, because one of my brothers was a full-time carer for mum, didn't finish school. Making sure if support had been better, his life would have been better, he'd have been contributing more, paying tax more. So there's all kinds of state benefits of getting these things done better, as well as it being a personal story. When I finished university, I lived and worked in China for 2 years, teaching English and recruiting proper teachers, I would say, not me, into China and getting them to stay. There was a problem with retention back then. When I came back, I applied for the Rights Commission, and it was amazing. It was a brilliant place to work, great friendships from there, and obviously linked to the personal family story. It was really rewarding and meant I ended up running Disability Alliance and helping set up Disability Rights UK, so helping 500,000 disabled people and carers every year, and the councillor in Southwark, so elected in 2010 in the Newington ward, which is no longer in my constituency, but just next to the Elephant and Castle. The boundary review last year took it out of my constituency. So immediately before this, I've been with NHS England, who talk through some of the changes they're seeing and also messages they'd like MPs to be pushing within our communities. They want me to be highlighting the need for more people to get vaccines. There's been a dip, there's some problem with some anti-vax sign campaigning, and we need to combat that if we don't want to see unnecessary illnesses spread and people suffering more, and the NHS paying more to treat people than it should do in years to come. That was immediately beforehand. Before that, I was with Copperfield, which is a breast cancer campaign, which is actually based in Bermondsey, their office, but they're here on a national level to see all MPs, or as many as come through. And again, they're highlighting some of the harder to reach groups and women who need to be checking more regularly, including in Southwark, younger women who, especially if there's any family prevalence of breast cancer, need to be checking at a younger age rather than waiting for the formal screening to kick in after 50. Identifies issues too late, and with the terrible pathways of that. We've got Guy's Cancer Treatment, globally renowned, first-class, world-class treatment centre in the constituency, so we should be able to do better in a community like ours. So there's a mixture of different meetings, some very local. I try to dedicate Mondays and Fridays to actually in the constituency meetings, as well as weekends, and my open door surgery in Bermondsey on a Friday afternoon. So there are some sort of routine bits that don't change weekly, but there's a lot of variety in the job. It's a really rewarding and varied role. There's a lot of change and flux, as long as you can cope with it. I try to be as accessible as possible, and my open door surgery in my Bermondsey office helps about 500 people a month. Every Friday I'm out in a different bit of the local community trying to reach people firsthand, so that people don't have to come to me. I can see them and see what issues, lots of housing, tackling ancestral behaviour problems. The party, I wouldn't be in the Labour Party if I didn't believe we are trying to address the fundamental challenges facing our country and our community. There have been differences in the past. People had me down as an anti-Corbyn Labour MP. I certainly was. He was a disaster for the Labour Party. He was a disaster on issues that matter not just to Southwark, but the Southwark vote in the Brexit referendum was 72% against leaving. If the then leadership of the Labour Party had done more, if Corbyn had cared about that issue enough, we might have run a better campaign within Labour members and supporters to make sure we got more voters out, given how close the result was. I found his lack of leadership a huge problem, and at a time when our country needed leadership, he was massively lacking, and of course was disastrous on many levels, not least because he failed to tackle racism within the Labour Party. And I found we don't have a synagogue in the constituency. There used to be one in Surrey Docks many years ago, before the war, but with no synagogue, no identifiable place to go, I couldn't make a case for what I was doing within Labour to challenge both Corbyn and where the problem was. I certainly reported anyone who caused problems within the constituency, got them thrown out of the party where I could. But when Jewish neighbours, members of our community came to see me, it was horrendous to have to apologise for the Labour Party. The Labour Party has been the strongest vehicle for tackling racism in this country's political history, except for that aberration where we had Corbyn as leader because of him personally, but also because of the people he brought into the Labour Party who had a real problem. And thankfully, under Keir Starmer, we've turned that around. And I thank people's patience for staying with me. I actually signed up Jewish members of the Labour Party in Southwark because when they met me and I explained what I was doing, they had more confidence that there were voices within Labour. In fact, you can actually see the Daily Telegraph front page is on my wall because some of us stood up against their own party at personal cost. I was threatened with deselection. I was threatened with being thrown out of the party myself by people who wanted to defend Corbyn at any cost. And it was a difficult period, but I hope people in the local community will see that I'm quite prepared to stand up against my own party if it makes mistakes. So a good example is the Bakerloo line extension, which Southwark Labour have supported and helped fund part of the campaign, have helped with the locking of land, so the stations where the Bakerloo line extension will come from the Elephant Castle down, basically Old Kent Road, out to Lewisham. The stations next to Tesco, next to Asda along Old Kent Road, all the land is legally held, everything's there. Boris Johnson, when he was Mayor of London, promised it would all be open by 2030. Another promise he failed to deliver. Honestly, wasn't his strong point. But it is frustrating now. I know we have a difficult economic inheritance. 14 years of damage to the economy, including through Brexit, has meant the economy has shrunk faster. GDP is lower, 8%, far lower than people expected, and productivity has dropped as a result of Brexit. So we shouldn't be shy of pinpointing where responsibility lies, but it does mean we have to be more patient in some of the projects that many of us would like to see come forward. I'm delighted, don't get me wrong, I'm delighted that DLR is going through to Thamesmead. The SE28 postcode is the only postcode in London that didn't have a station, so DLR coming to that bit of London is great for them and an improvement for South London generally. But the Bakerloo line comes with obviously transport infrastructure improvements for our bit of London, our community directly, 20,000 plus homes along the Old Kent Road, which is a massive dent in housing waiting lists, as long as some of that is for social housing. I think 7,000 were meant to be social housing. But it's jobs in Yorkshire because that's where the trains are built. It's jobs in Kent for the construction. There's an economic contribution that goes far beyond London if we get this right. I would like it to be brought forward quicker. I believe it's shovel ready, but patience isn't my strongest virtue, if I have any. But I will keep trying. I'll make sure that we'll get there eventually, hopefully within my political lifetime. And not party lines. I want the Bakerloo line delivered, and I want us to at least be back in the customs union whenever I end my parliamentary career. Those are some sort of personal aspirations that go beyond any party political policy. One thing I really like, if you come into my Bermondsey office, you'll see the thank you cards, because the one thing that makes this rewarding is you see the turnaround in some people's lives, the difference that a small intervention can sometimes makes a huge difference. There's a woman who was punished by the Home Office due to them mistaking her identity. They thought someone who'd gone to prison was her. It was just the same name. It was a different age, a different bit of the country. It took a long time to turn around her circumstances in a period in which she'd become homeless and reliant on charity for support. And she had a young son. The physical difference in her is amazing. He now volunteers and comes out knocking doors and delivering leaflets. It's nice to get to know the family. There's one family I've helped, so I'm godfather to their son. In a parliamentary sense, I've changed the law. Obviously, we had the terror attack at London Bridge and Borough Market. Businesses and communities affected by attacks of a similar nature are now better protected because of the work I led with the Home Office and the last government. Sajid Javid, as Home Secretary, delivered the legislative change that I was looking for after that attack. And I helped with charities like Women's Aid change the law to protect women fleeing domestic violence in a way that will save lives, will provide permanent accommodation. To have the chance to be able to do those, change the law in ways that I know will have a massive difference and potentially save lives is an enormous privilege. And 4 changes in law while in opposition in 9 years was pretty solid track record as backbenchers go. I was in government. I hope Labour ministers will listen in the same way that some Conservative ministers did. I do all my shopping on foot, so I'll take a backpack into the big Tesco and do my weekly shop. I'd always phone Dad on the way, unfortunately passed away. So that call would always put a smile on my face once a week. And I know how proud he and my family are that I have this role. Reading, walking. I've just been in the Peak District this weekend with friends, just exercise and reading. You see some of the books in my office. It's always been a great escape for me. And it doesn't take me long to hide in a book, frankly, a pick-me-up and solace. But also just walking, generally just walking my dog. She's a lot of fun. Although when you are a public figure, if you're recognisable, it does mean I get stopped. Sometimes there was a bloke stopped me in the street, and I'll be honest, I didn't recognise him initially. He just stopped me, came up for a hug, and he'd just moved into his new home that I and my team had helped secure. Yes, people will come with demands, if you like, with cases, issues to raise, but equally you get the thanks and the people are grateful when you're able to make a difference, which is nice. Probably one of the most difficult circumstances to try and help with was a woman whose teenage son was murdered near the Elephant Castle. And she asked me, I wanted to see her after the news broke about her son. She told me to come around, and I was going to her home. I knew other members of the family would be there. This was quite early I think it was my first year in Westminster. I'd never dealt with that before. It was before Joe Cox was murdered, so I had no personal experience to draw on. And I actually spoke to a local vicar who was really helpful about compartmentalising, trying to be an office rather than a person, if you like, rather than we've developed a friendship, and she's appreciative of efforts. Having been in the charity sector, I'd never had to deal with anything like that before. So that was quite a challenging moment, but we learn from doing things like that, and it gives us strengths and resilience, I think. Get involved. The simplest route to being able to help others or realise a political ambition is to make sure you're aware and have the networks. And that doesn't always mean listening to the loudest voices, but taking the temperature of a room, reading a room, making sure that you're talking. Often at schools, when I invite the schools to come in, and I try and visit as many in Southwark, and I always say, if you're standing for the class election, don't just talk to the loudest kids or classmates. Make sure you're talking to everyone, find out what they want, try and reflect that in any speech you're required to give in a school election, whatever. But being involved is really important, and I have placements in my office from different local schools and children of constituents who want to come in and see how this office works in Westminster, but I always say come and see Bermondsey. The media, it's easy to cover Westminster, it's physical building and presence. The bit that isn't seen is what goes on in the local office and what we do in our local communities. So I always encourage them to come along with me out on the doors, or come and sit in my office when I'm doing my advice service to see and hear what local people do actually raise. Housing being the number one issue, but tackling antisocial behaviour is why I'm pleased with some of the measures this government's bringing through. We've got extra police in Southwark. The council's taken on an antisocial behaviour unit team working at night when things are more problematic, and there's new powers coming through to respect orders to tackle problems. Seeing all of that, making sure you understand why that's an issue and why the government is in that direction, if you like, is really important. But also through being involved, you're campaigning, you're knocking doors, and you're building your own network of friends. And that's crucial when it comes to things like selections. The election bit, the public-facing bit, is at the end of a more difficult process, which is the selection. Because to get selected as a candidate for council or for parliament, you have to have a mass of support behind you. And you can build that over months and years. If you're involved from whatever age, you build a network of people who will help you with that process if they see in you someone they want to help get elected.